My client ate like she hadn't eaten in days, then whispered in her sleep, "Please don't make me go back there." A year later, I walked past her counseling office, where she was singing to her twins. The cop had his hand on his gun before he finished saying good morning. That's the detail people always miss when I tell this story, not the fake warrant, not the way he shoved past me into my own shop like I was furniture he needed to move around. Not even Rachel's face, visible for a half second in the supply closet mirror, before I caught the reflection and looked away fast, heart slamming. It was the hand, casual, practiced, resting on the grip of his service weapon the way most men rest a hand on a countertop, like it was just a thing he did, like the threat was so natural to him it had become unconscious. Officer Derek Chen, 6'2", pressed uniform, cold, flat eyes that didn't blink at the right intervals, which I noticed and cataloged and filed away in the part of my brain that had been quietly cataloging things about this man for weeks without my permission. I had a pregnant woman hiding in my supply closet, a cop who beat her standing 3 feet from me, and a phone in my apron pocket that I'd hit record on before I'd even thought about it. Muscle memory from a life that had already taught me too many times that words without proof are just breath. "Haven't seen any Rachel," I said. Just closed up. I'd been lying to protect people for exactly 45 seconds. It was the longest 45 seconds of my life, and it was also somehow the beginning of the first year Rachel would ever spend free. I want to back up because context matters here, and I'm not the kind of person who skips steps. My name is Jordan. I'm 31. I've owned Meridian Inc., a tattoo studio in the Eastside Arts District, for 6 years. Before that, I apprenticed under a woman named Greta Vasquez, who told me on my first day that tattooing was the most intimate profession that didn't require a medical license, because you were asking someone to lie still and trust you with their skin. "People will tell you things," she said, "things they've never said out loud. Your job is to hold it without flinching." I thought she meant people cry sometimes. I thought she meant the needle hurts. She meant something else entirely, and it took 6 years of running my own shop to understand it. My studio is small, 4 chairs, exposed brick, a neon sign in the window that says "Be Brave" in pink cursive that I bought as a joke and kept because it felt true. I work mostly alone. I have one other artist, my friend Thomas, who comes in Tuesday through Friday. Saturdays I run solo. I like it that way. Saturdays feel like a confessional. The city slows down, and people come in with ideas they've been sitting on for months, and the needle goes in, and something loosens in them, and they start talking. Rachel Vasquez, no relation to Greta, first walked into Meridian Inc. on a rainy Tuesday in early October. She wanted a tree on her forearm. Specific. A white oak, bare branches, reaching. She had a reference photo saved in her phone. She'd clearly been thinking about it for a long time. She was 26, quiet, beautiful in the way that made you want to look a second time, not because of anything flashy, but because something in her face was trying very hard to appear unbothered and wasn't quite making it. Thomas was with me that day. He glanced at her intake form and passed it to me without comment, which was his way of saying, "This one's yours." He does that sometimes. He has a nose for it. I sat with her for the consultation. We talked about the tree. Why an oak? Why bare? Why reaching? She said she liked things that looked like they were trying. I said I did too. I sketched 3 variations. She chose the one with the longest branches. I booked her for the following Saturday. That first session was uneventful. She was a model client, sat still, barely winced, tipped 30%. She asked about the framed prints on my walls. I told her about the artists. She listened like she was genuinely interested, which in my experience either means someone's very kind or very practiced at performing calm. With Rachel, I would later understand it was both. I noticed the bruise on her second visit, not immediately. She'd rolled up her sleeve to show me how the healed lines were setting, and I was leaning in with my magnifier when the sleeve caught and slid up further than she'd intended, and I saw it. A bruise the size of a fist, on her upper arm, purple going green at the edges. 2, maybe 3 days old. In the center, faint but undeniable, the impression of a thumb. She saw me see it. We looked at each other for maybe 1 second. Then I straightened up and said, "Lines are healing beautifully. Ready to start?" And she said yes. And neither of us mentioned it again. I knew better than to push. My sister Carla had been in a relationship like this when we were in our 20s. I'd said the wrong thing. Just leave him. It's not that complicated. And she hadn't spoken to me for 4 months. And in those 4 months, he'd put her in the hospital twice. Timing matters. Trust matters. You can't force the door. You can only make sure you're standing on the other side of it when they're ready to open it themselves. So I kept my mouth shut, but I started paying attention in ways I hadn't before. On her 3rd visit, the bruise was gone, but she moved differently, protective of her ribs when she settled into the chair, a slight catch in her breath when she reached across the table for the stencil. Not dramatic. You'd miss it if you weren't looking. I was looking. On her 4th visit, she was 15 minutes early and sat in her car for 12 of them. I watched her through the window. She had her hands hands on the steering wheel, and she was just breathing. She came in. She sat down. She let me tattoo her for 2 hours without a word. At 1 hour, 45 minutes, she finally spoke. "My friend won't be home to let me in tonight," she said. Her voice was flat in a way that meant it was working very hard not to crack. "I'll figure it out. Never mind. You can stay here." I didn't let her finish. "I'm pulling an all-nighter anyway, catching up on admin. I've got a cot in the back from when I used to sleep here during the build-out." Both of those things were lies. I was not pulling an all-nighter. There was no admin. The cot was real, but it was under 3 boxes of shipping supplies and 2 rolls of transfer paper. She knew I was lying. I could see it in the small shift of her expression, something that might have been gratitude dressed up as skepticism. "I don't want to be any trouble," she said. "You're not trouble. You're a client who needs a place to crash. Occupational hazard." She said, "Okay, just that." "Okay." I ordered food from the Thai place 2 blocks over. I told her I was throwing out the surplus. Lie number 3. I watched her eat a chicken sandwich in 4 bites with the careful speed of someone who'd learned not to let food just sit there, because sitting there wasn't always a guarantee. I set up the cot. She said thank you in a way that landed somewhere between ordinary and devastating. I went back to my station and actually did end up doing admin, because there was no way I was going to sleep. At 2:17 a.m., from the back room, very quietly, she whispered, "Please don't make me go back there." I don't think she was awake when she said it. I sat very still for a long time. In the morning, she was already up when I came in, sitting at my station with her hands wrapped around a coffee I hadn't made, which meant she'd found the machine herself and figured it out, which meant she'd been awake for a while. She looked at me for a long moment. Then she looked down at the coffee. "I'm pregnant," she said. 8 weeks. She said it like a confession, like she was handing me something fragile and waiting to see if I'd drop it. "Okay," I said. "He doesn't know." "Okay. If he finds out—" She stopped. Tried again. "He's a police officer. Officer Derek Chen. He works the East Side District." A pause. "He has friends. Everywhere." I pulled up a chair and sat across from her. "Is there somewhere safe you can go? Family?" She shook her head. "My parents are in Phoenix. He knows their address. He's called them before to check on me." A hollow pause. "He calls it keeping in touch." I thought about my sister, about the 4 months of silence, about what had happened in those 4 months. "Have you documented anything?" I asked. Something shifted in her face. She reached into her bag, a small canvas tote that I now realized she'd had with her every single visit, which maybe wasn't a coincidence, and pulled out a tablet. What she showed me made my hands go cold. 2 years of photographs, cataloged, dated, labeled. Bruises photographed in natural light next to a newspaper with the date visible. Written logs, timestamps. She'd recorded voice memos on her phone after certain incidents and transferred them. She had a note from an urgent care visit from 14 months ago where she'd been treated for 2 cracked ribs and listed the cause as fell during a run. Rachel Vasquez was meticulous in the way that abuse survivors sometimes become meticulous, because documentation is the only power that doesn't get taken away when you're sleeping. She was also, I realized as I scrolled, terrified, not of showing me this, of what came after. "I didn't know where to go," she said quietly. "If I go to the police department, I know." I said. I did. She looked at me. "I'm not ready to disappear tonight. I know that too. But soon. We'll figure it out." I didn't know if that was true. I said it anyway because sometimes the shape of a promise matters more than its certainty. I made a call that afternoon that I'd had the number for and never used. Domestic Violence Underground Railroad, DVUR, a nonprofit network operating across 11 states, connecting survivors with safe houses, legal advocates, and relocation resources, specializing in cases involving abusers in law enforcement or positions of institutional power. I'd gotten their number from a flyer at a community meeting 2 years ago, folded it into my wallet, told myself I'd probably never need it. The woman who answered identified herself only as coordinator, efficient. No flinching in her voice, not even when I explained the situation. "Law enforcement abuser with an East Side Patrol territory," she said. "We've had cases from that district before." She didn't elaborate. I didn't ask her to. "We'll need a few days to arrange a placement," she said. "Secure location, transport out. Keep her off her phone. If he has access to her carrier account, he may be monitoring location data. Get her a burner if you can." I bought one at a pharmacy that afternoon. Prepaid, cash. Rachel spent the next 2 nights at the studio. She called in sick to her job, a dental receptionist position downtown, and I gave her the back room and brought food and told Thomas when he came in Wednesday that the closed sign was staying on the supply closet because I was reorganizing inventory. Thomas, who is perceptive and kind and knows when not to ask questions, simply said, "Got it," and minded his chairs. On Thursday morning at 7 a.m., 3 officers knocked on the front door of Meridian Inc. Derek stood at the front. He was in full uniform, hand resting on his holster with that same unconscious ease I remembered from the stories Rachel had told me. Cold eyes scanning the room in one sweep, the way people do when they're looking for something and trying not to look like they're looking. "We're looking for a Rachel Vasquez," he said. "Family's worried. We have reason to believe she may be in the area." I'd been expecting something. Not this soon, not this openly. My body body made the decision before my brain caught up. Hand went into my apron pocket. Thumb found the record button on my phone. Haven't seen any Rachel, I said. Just opened up. He smiled. It didn't reach anything above his jaw. Mind if we take a look around? Routine. He was already pushing past me before I'd answered. This is private property, I said. He ignored that. He walked the main floor of the studio slowly, hands clasped behind his back now, looking at the prints on the wall, the station setups, the cleaning supplies, performing casualness. A second officer, younger, maybe 26, name tag reading Williams, followed behind him. The third stood outside the door. Rachel's jacket was draped over the chair at my station. Her phone was in the pocket. I clocked it 2 seconds before he did. Her ringtone went off, a short notification buzz, the specific double vibrate she'd set for text alerts. Distinctive. He'd clearly heard it before, many times. His eyes went straight to the jacket. In the time it took him to cross the floor, I had already moved. 3 steps to the chair, jacket in my hands, forcing a casual expression that cost me approximately 10 years of my life to maintain. Client left it last week, I said. Same ringtone. Weird coincidence. He looked at me. I looked at him. He reached out and took the jacket from my hands with the specific quality of motion that says I could break you and we both know it. Went through the pocket, pulled out her phone, the notification still lit on the screen. Then from the inner pocket, her ID. The room went cold in a way that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. Williams had drifted to the back of the studio. He had his hand on the supply closet doorknob. Should we check back here, Sarge? A beat. Derek's eyes were still on me. She's not hiding in a closet, he said. His voice was very quiet, the kind of quiet that's louder than shouting. Check the bathroom again, Williams. Williams looked at the doorknob, looked at Derek. Let go of the knob. That was when I understood. He didn't want witnesses to whatever came next. He wanted to find her when I wasn't watching, or he wanted to find her alone, in a smaller space, with fewer angles being recorded. I kept my phone in my pocket and running. They left after 11 minutes. No warrant produced, no legal basis articulated. Just 3 officers who came to look and left unsatisfied. Derek's jaw tight in the particular way of a man unaccustomed to not finding what he came for. After the cruiser pulled away, I counted to 60. Then I knocked on the supply closet. Rachel came out shaking, not panic. She'd done controlled breathing in there. I could tell from the rhythm of her exhale. But her hands were trembling and her face had that particular set that I'd come to recognize. The expression of someone who has survived something that was supposed to unmake them. Worn so many times it's become a kind of armor. He knew I was here, she said. Maybe. He found your phone. He's been pinging my location. She held up the burner I'd given her. I forgot to leave the real one at home. I'm sorry, don't apologize, I said. We pivot. We call the coordinator. I called. The coordinator picked up on the second ring. Change of timeline, I said. Tonight. Location. Getting Rachel across the city should not have been a strategic operation that required a traffic monitoring app, a spare wig, and 3 wrong turns through loading dock alleys. It was. I'd been watching Derek's patrol zone on the city's real-time traffic and incident map. It's publicly available, originally designed for commuters, long enough by then to know his usual routes. He patrolled a tight pattern on the east side, methodical, predictable. But predictable can be redrawn when there's motivation. I watched 3 of his cruisers' reported positions over 40 minutes. There were patrol cars at the major intersection leading to the DVUR Safe House Transfer Point, a community center on the north side of the district, run by a woman named Dr. Amara Osei, who served as a DVUR relay coordinator in addition to her work as a licensed family therapist. We left at 10:45 p.m. Rachel wore my spare wig, shoulder length, dark, absolutely nothing like her own hair. Dark coat, different shoes than she'd come in with. She'd thought of this herself. We took the alley behind Meridian Inc. to the next block, cut north through the parking structure on Garfield, came out on a side street that Google Maps doesn't render well because it doesn't have a formal name. We were halfway to the transfer point when headlights filled the end of the alley. A patrol car, idling. Williams was in the driver's seat. He was alone. I stopped walking. My hand found Rachel's arm. The headlights were on us. Williams and I made eye contact through the windshield, 30 feet of alley between us. He slowed to a near stop. 1 second, 2, he kept driving. I didn't exhale for another block. At 11:31 p.m., Dr. Osei answered her door and took Rachel's hand and said, "You're safe here." She said it with the particular warmth of someone who has said it many times and never lost the meaning of it. Rachel looked at me before she went inside. I thought she might cry. She didn't. "How do I thank you for this?" she said. "Don't," I said. "Get some sleep." She nodded once. Went inside. Dr. Osei closed the door. I stood in the dark for a moment, and then I went home, and I sat on my kitchen floor for probably 20 minutes, which I don't fully remember. Derek was not a man who gave up. By the following morning, my Google reviews had been hit with 11 one-star ratings posted between 2 a.m. and 5 a.m. Accounts with no history, no photos, all created recently, all describing my shop as dirty, unprofessional, or dangerous. I screenshotted everything, sent it to a lawyer I'd used for the business lease, Elena Marchetti, who'd been practicing civil and small business law for 14 years, and who listened to my summary and said, with the careful neutrality of someone organizing facts, document everything, every timestamp. I was already doing that. On Tuesday, a city health inspector showed up at Meridian Inc. at 8:15 a.m., 20 minutes before I normally open. He identified himself as Inspector Dale Forsyth, presented credentials, and began walking my studio with a clipboard. He found, I am not kidding, a labeling issue on one bottle of green soap, a minor ventilation concern about the secondary workstation, and what he called an instrument storage discrepancy that I'm fairly certain he made up on the spot. By 9:07 a.m., he had issued a temporary closure notice. I called Elena. She told me to appear at the Board of Health Appeals office the following morning with documentation of my standard compliance record. I did. The closure was overturned in 9 days after review showed every inspection I'd passed for 6 years, 9 days during which I had no income. My sister Carla got a visit on Thursday, then Friday, then Saturday. Derek, in full uniform, went to the crisis center where she works as a case manager and asked to speak with her about a welfare check on a mutual acquaintance. He didn't wait in the lobby. He walked to her desk. He stood over her and asked questions about me, where I lived, who I was close to, whether I'd ever mentioned someone named Rachel. Carla texted me after the first visit. By the third visit, her supervisor, a cautious woman named Patricia Diaz, 19 years in social services, had gently suggested that whatever situation Carla was connected to, it might be advisable for Carla to consider her position carefully. Carla called me that night. "He's coming after everything you have," she said. She wasn't scared. She was angry. Carla has been angry at powerful men who frighten women since she was 22 and living with one. "What do we do?" "I'm working on it," I said. I wasn't sure that was true. At 2:09 a.m. on a Thursday, my studio's back entrance produced a knock. Quiet. 3 times, a pause, twice more. I'd given that knock pattern to exactly one person as a signal, and that person wasn't supposed to be here. Williams was out of uniform, jeans, a gray hoodie pulled low. He looked like a man who was reconsidering every decision that had led him to this moment, and had arrived anyway. He pressed a USB drive into my hands. "I shouldn't be here," he said. "I know. He's got more reach than you understand." I'm starting to understand. He looked at me for a moment, and in his face I saw something I recognized from Rachel's, the expression of someone deciding in real time whether the thing that might destroy them is worth doing anyway. "There are 3 other women," he said, "who filed complaints against him. Internal affairs files." I pulled what I could, redacted, but the names are there. I looked at the drive in my hand. One of them, he stopped, started again. Rachel knew her, Sarah Hendricks. Derek told Rachel that Sarah moved to Florida. I waited. "Sarah Hendricks' body was found in her apartment 14 months ago," he said. "It was ruled a suicide." The sound my studio made was nothing, just the hum of the refrigeration unit and the buzz of the neon sign. "Williams," I said. "Yeah, you need protection." "I know that too." He was gone in 4 minutes. I spent the rest of the night staring at the USB drive and thinking about Sarah Hendricks and what it means for a thing to be ruled something when the person who rules it might be the person who did it. I called Elena at 6:45 a.m. She referred me before I'd finished my second sentence to a colleague, Marcus Webb, who had spent 11 years as a federal prosecutor before transitioning to private practice and had done 2 years of police accountability litigation that had resulted in 4 departmental investigations and 2 criminal referrals. He was 53, methodical, not interested in being anyone's hero. He was exactly what the situation required. Marcus listened to my full account in one sitting, asked 12 questions, and then was quiet for a moment. "The body cam footage on that drive," he said. "If it's authentic and shows what you're describing, pattern of conduct, retaliatory behavior, evidence tampering, this goes federal." "How quickly?" "If I can get this to the right contact at the FBI's Public Corruption Unit, quickly." "There's a woman who might be pregnant," I said. "She needs to be able to give testimony at some point." "Where is she?" "Safe. She needs to stay that way." Agent Dana Shaw was 39 years old, 12 years with the FBI's Civil Rights Division, 4 of those spent on a specialized unit investigating law enforcement misconduct. Marcus put us in contact on a Sunday evening. She came to his office Monday morning, drove a nondescript silver Toyota, carried a navy tote bag, and shook my hand with the focused, quiet energy of someone who had heard things that could not be unheard and had decided to let that be a reason to keep going rather than stop. I handed her the USB drive. She looked at it. "Where did you get this?" "Someone with a conscience," I said. She looked at me for a moment, then at Marcus. "This is going to take some time," she said. "I need you to understand that. Time and the right sequence." "How much time?" 6 to 8 weeks for a proper federal predicate investigation before any action. A pause. "Can the witness stay safe for 6 to 8 weeks?" I thought about Rachel and Dr. Osie's care, about the documentation she'd been carrying for 2 years, about the twin determination in her voice when she'd first told me she was pregnant, the way she'd said it like a fact she was learning to hold. Yes, I said. The 6 weeks were the longest 6 weeks of my adult life. Marcus filed a civil harassment and retaliatory action complaint against Derek Chen on behalf of myself and my sister Carla. Not to win, not yet, but to create a formal record that made any further targeting legally complicated. The health inspector's file was subpoenaed. The timing of the reviews, the inspection, Derek's visits to Carla's workplace, all of it went into a document that was beginning to look less like isolated bad luck and more like what it was. Rachel, in the safe house, gained 9 pounds, started prenatal care under a doctor who worked with DVUR cases. Dr. Vivian Tran, OB, who has the specific gentleness of someone who has seen what happens when women don't receive care early enough, and began working with a trauma counselor. She sent me a message through the coordinator twice. Both were 2 words: still here. I replied the same way both times: still here. Williams disappeared from Derek's precinct 3 weeks in. He applied for a transfer citing personal reasons, which was approved. I don't know where he went. Marcus knew not to tell me. The FBI raid on Derek Chen's residence happened at 5:47 a.m. on a Wednesday in January. I wasn't there. I heard from Marcus, who heard from Agent Shaw. She called him first, then he called me, and her exact words, as relayed by a man who had spent 11 years prosecuting federal cases and did not embellish, were, "What agents found inside that house stopped some very experienced people cold. Sarah Hendricks' driver's license, preserved in a clear evidence bag inside a locked box in a home office closet, organized with 4 other items that a woman who has moved to Florida does not leave behind. 3 other names, 3 other women, 2 of them still living." The case that had started with Rachel's bruised arm and a sandwich I'd pretended I was throwing out anyway had become something considerably larger than either of us had understood. Sentencing was 6 months after the arrest. He'd been charged federally, civil rights violations, obstruction, evidence tampering, and in connection with Sarah Hendricks' death, felony murder with special circumstances. The plea negotiations had collapsed in week 2. Derek Chen believed, apparently, up until the week of trial that something would intercede, that some remaining connection, some remaining door his badge had opened, would open again. No door opened. I sat in the gallery next to Carla. Marcus was 2 rows forward. Dr. Osi was there. Williams had come. I spotted him across the aisle in civilian clothes, hands folded, looking at nothing in particular with the expression of a man making peace with something. Rachel sat in the front row. She was 27 weeks along by then. She sat straight. She had watched every day of the trial with the specific stillness of a person who has spent a long time preparing for a thing and was now simply being present for it. The judge read the verdict: 45 years to life. In the half-second that followed, Derek Chen, who had spent the entire trial performing composure, came apart completely. He lunged from his chair, knocked the defense table sideways, a crack of wood against the gallery rail that made everyone in the room flinch, charged toward Rachel's side of the room, 2 officers on him in seconds, and he was screaming, not words exactly, just the sound of a man whose certainty that he was untouchable had just been removed, and 2 shots from a deputy's taser dropped him, and he hit the floor still moving, still screaming, threatened her from the floor of a federal courtroom with his entire life already gone. Rachel didn't flinch. She watched him go down, and she turned to me, and her expression was not triumph. It wasn't relief exactly. It was something quieter than both of those things. He used to tell me, she said very quietly, under the noise of the room resettling itself, that no one would ever believe me. She glanced toward the floor where Derek was being restrained. He was wrong about a lot of things. I thought the story ended there. It almost did. On the way out of the courthouse, I fell into step beside Agent Shaw. She was packing her navy tote bag with the flat efficiency of someone who would have 3 more cases on her desk before the week was out. "That name," I said, "on the drive Williams gave me, the one that wasn't from the precinct files." She paused. "There was a 4th name," I said. "Different formatting. No badge number. Someone who had access to Derek's internal records. Someone who may have helped things get ruled a certain way." Agent Shaw looked at me. Her face did something complicated. The expression of someone who has confirmed, without confirming, that you have understood correctly. "The investigation," she said carefully, "is ongoing." "How ongoing?" "Significantly." She shook my hand. Got in the silver Toyota. Drove away. I stood on the courthouse steps in the January cold, and I thought about the 4th name and what ruled means, and who gets to rule things, and whether the next year was going to ask more of me than the last one had. The answer to that last question was probably yes. I went back to work. It's been 12 months. Meridian Inc. is open again, has been, uninterrupted, for most of the year. The fake reviews are gone, scrubbed after the civil complaint forced a platform audit. The health inspector Forsyth is under his own administrative investigation for a pattern of what are being described carefully as procedurally irregular inspections dating back 4 years. Patricia Diaz, Carla's supervisor, wrote a formal apology. Carla accepted it with the equanimity of a woman who no longer needs the apology to feel okay. Rachel had twins, 2 girls, Born healthy in late March, 7 weeks early but strong. Aggressively strong, said Dr. Tran, which is maybe the best possible thing to be. Rachel named one of them Sarah. She moved out of the safe house, into an apartment, into a life. She went back to school, online, nights, for social work. She told me in a text in September that she wanted to work with women coming out of situations like hers, that she felt useful when she was listening, that someone had taught her that listening was a profession, and she believed it. She started a counseling internship in October at a community center 2 neighborhoods from Meridian, Inc. Yesterday, I walked past on my way to pick up supplies. The door was open, propped with a cinder block, afternoon heat spilling out. From inside, I could hear Rachel's voice, low and warm, doing something I hadn't heard from her in all the months I'd known her. She was singing. One of her daughters was on her lap. The other was in a bouncer by the wall. Rachel was singing something soft and wordless, working at her computer with one hand, the twins' noises layered into it, and the whole thing, the room, the light, the ordinary sound of a woman who used to whisper, "Please don't make me go back there now," making music out of being somewhere she wanted to be, landed on me like something I hadn't expected. I kept walking. She didn't see me. Some moments aren't meant to be interrupted. He told her no one would ever believe her. I believed her. Thomas believed her without being asked. Williams believed her enough to be terrified in the dark outside my back door. Dr. Osei believed her. Agent Shaw believed her. Marcus believed her. Dr. Tran believed her. The 12 people in that jury box believed her. She believed herself. That was the part he'd been working hardest to take away, and the part he'd never managed to. The investigation into the 4th name is still ongoing. I still have Agent Shaw's number memorized. I'm still here.